For this project, I set out to learn new skills on poetic forms with a theme based on refugees in Europe. My topic is poetry, and I have always had an interest in poetry and have always enjoyed writing poetry. For this project, I decided to do poetry as I wanted to enhance my knowledge on poetic forms and skills, and I wanted to be able to write it effectively. I have always liked the way poems sound and how they can make you change your perspective on many different things. I like the quote by Robert Frost which says, "Poetry is when an emotion has found its thoughts, and the thoughts has found words." I really like this quote as it depicts how I feel about poetry and why I love it so much. My goal for this project is to be able to master poetic forms and deepen my knowledge on poetry. I did not want to write my poems about something as vague as love or use many different themes. When I was watching the news, there were many reports about the refugee crisis in Europe, and I thought that this would be an interesting topic to cover as it affected many lives in Europe. I also wanted to cover the theme refugees, as many of us in society were or have been associated with refugees, whether it be us, our parents, or our friends. To reach this goal, I will research 10 different styles of poetry and choose the best one which fits my theme. This project, I will use personal and cultural expressions as my global context. I think that this is the best choice for my project as it deals with ways in which we discover and express ideas, feelings, nature, culture, beliefs, and values. It also allows us to reflect and expand on our creativity. My goal for this project was to research 10 different forms of poetry in 10 weeks and base each style of poetry on the research about the refugees in Europe I had discovered. For my final outcome, I would choose the styles that I thought matched my theme properly and create one final poem which I would present. This project will be highly challenging as I do not know a lot about how to write poems and how to present an effective spoken word poem. It would also be difficult to present my poem as I will need to work on my confidence and stage presence. To accomplish this goal, I will need to do a lot of research and look at different styles of famous poets and famous spoken word poets and develop my presentation skills so that I can perform as well or better than the artists that I have watched perform. In order to measure my success in reaching my goal, I will produce 10 different styles of poem, present my spoken word poem, make my poem have an impact on others, and aim to express my feelings about the refugees in Europe. In order to get started on my project, I needed to research 10 different forms of poetry. In order to know about the poems, I had to learn their techniques. To get a better understanding, I would look at famous poems which were used in this particular type of poetry. As well as research about the forms of poetry I would use, I also needed to research and find information about the refugees in Europe. Every week, I would find new information and try and use that information I found and incorporate it in the form of poetry I researched. Once I finished all my research, I needed to find out information on spoken word poetry, how to create one, how to make an effective performance, and tips about spoken word poetry. I used the internet for most of my research. To find the poetry terms I wanted to do, or to find specific details that dealt with the poem I chose, I would use websites such as poetryfoundation.org and youngwriters.co.uk. When I found the style of poetry I wanted to use, I would use the internet to find a famous poem which used the same style. To do this, I would use websites such as famouspoetsandpoems.com. For my research on refugees, I would use articles such as CNN.com or blogs to find relevant information on the refugee crisis in Europe. When getting closer to writing and presenting my final poem, I interviewed my mentor, a spoken word performer in Jamaica. Ali Madelon gave me tips and advice which helped me with my performance. I also performed my poem to her, my mom, my supervisor, and my friend to get feedback from them. I got many different feedbacks, some positive and some areas in which I needed to improve on. For example, my supervisor told me to talk slower and emphasize words, and my mom told me to pronounce my words properly so that I could be clearly understood. As well as using websites and articles, I would read online newspapers to find facts, statistics, or stories about the refugees in Europe. In order to complete my project, I had to do a lot of research on both poetry and the refugees in Europe. In poetry, I found different rhyme schemes, syllable counts, and meter counts for every single poem I researched. After I found information about a specific form of poetry, I would then find a famous poem which used this form. Then I would write my own poem using the information I just learned. Once I finished my poem, I would critique what I did well on and how I can improve my writing skills. When researching spoken word poetry, I found out how to write one, how to make my poems effective, and how other people present different emotions and different topics. When researching refugees, I found how they are being treated in Europe, why they want to leave their country, and their journey to seek asylum. Poetry has a specific way and order in which you need to write that style. When I researched what to use for that specific form, I applied it when creating my own example from that style. Also, when I researched about the refugees, I would try and use my information found in my poems to make them more realistic. This information helped me to achieve my goal as I was able to grab people's attention about the journey and the struggle the refugees had to endure. I researched 10 different forms of poetry. After writing my own poem based on each example, I decided to not use all the ones I'd researched, as not all of them fit my theme and my topic properly. In my final poem, I used 4 different poems which conveyed my message in an efficient way. The 4 poetry styles I used were cinquain, rondo, dirge, and pantoum. As I had chosen 4 poems to do, I wanted to arrange them in a way that would make my poem flow well because every single style has a different beat and melody to it. I wanted my poem to connect with others, and in order to do so, I put myself in the shoes of a refugee child for my poem. The poetry style that I thought would be the most successful way to express my idea was the cinquain. This form of poetry allows a specific syllable count, no rhyme scheme, and is only 5 lines. After using a powerful cinquain to start and end my poem, I would then use a rondo, a pantoum, and a dirge, as I felt these would best help represent the image that I wanted to portray to my audience. Researching information allowed me to be more accurate in my poems. If I did not do any research, I would not have known what poems to use and how to use them. Researching information also helped me when dealing with the refugee crisis, as I was able to see how Europe was dealing with this massive exodus and how difficult their journey was. This helped me to change my perspective on the refugees and help solve my problems because at the beginning of the project, I did not know what I wanted to base my final poem on, but after much research, I realized that I wanted to pretend like I was a refugee child to show the audience the struggle they have to go through and how we as society look at them. To evaluate whether I felt that I achieved my goal or not, I went back to the criteria I made at the beginning of my project and assessed how well I did. For criteria A, I think that I did a great job as I was able to learn 10 different styles of poetry and learn different techniques on how to write different types of poems. After, I would critique all the poems I had written and discuss what I need to improve on by comparing them to famous poems. I was also able to enhance the use of figurative language as I was able to get a better understanding of what it is and how to use it. Judging my work out of 8, I would give myself a 7. For criteria B, I was able to learn the organizational structures of all the poems learned. As I developed my writing skills, I was able to organize my ideas so that they were not all scattered all over the place, and I was able to use appropriate language when needed. I was also able to organize my poem clearly and precisely so that my audience would be able to understand my idea and what I was performing for them. Judging my work out of 8, I would give myself an 8. For criteria C, I was able to create 10 different types of poems, all under the theme Refugees in Europe. I was also able to make choices and decide what information was relevant and what information I did not need to use for my final product. Every week, I was able to find new information about the refugee crisis and use my knowledge in my poems. I was also able to explore and reflect on my process critically and use information from friends and family on how to improve my spoken word poem, which allowed me to expand my creativity and develop new skills. As well, I was able to use a wide range of literary devices as my poems progressed so that I could captivate my audience. Judging my work out of 8, I would give myself a 7. Criteria D, I used appropriate language that suited my topic. I structured my sentences and expressed my feelings and opinions in a suitable way so that I could make people realize about the seriousness of the refugees and develop a better understanding of poetry and spoken word poetry. I was also able to use an appropriate style of writing and content, which made it easy for my audience to follow along with my poem. I was able to use correct grammar, punctuation, and syntax for all my poems that I created. I was also able to use appropriate non-verbal communication techniques in oral, presentation, or visual work. Judging my work out of 8, I would give myself a 7. In order to be organized, I followed a timetable I also created when I first began my project. Although I did not follow the timetable as thoroughly as I wanted to, referring to my timetable helped me to stay on track and focus on the things that I was supposed to have done or that needed to be done. This project has been highly challenging, but I have been able to extend my knowledge and understanding of poetry. I have learned many new skills on poetic forms such as figurative language, meter scheme, and extended my vocabulary, as well as find new information on the refugees in Europe. By completing this project, I have been able to identify with some of the IB learner profiles. For example, I was balanced as I was able to manage my schoolwork and also complete my research. I was also able to be knowledgeable as I had to gather information both about poetry and refugees and incorporate the two. I was being a communicator by presenting my poem to an audience, and I was able to be open-minded to such a sensitive topic. Completing this project has changed me because I have been able to realize that I really enjoy writing poetry as much as I love reading and writing it. I was also able to understand the struggle and hardship that the refugees had to go through, which made me change my perspective on refugees.